Welcome to Tapestry Feminine Collective Podcast, the show featuring presenters and artists from the 1111 Tapestry Feminine Collective experience. Now, here's your host. Welcome, everyone, back to Tapestry Feminine Collective Podcast. I'm your host, Arlia Hoffman. I'm with the Women's Agency. We are a proud Indigo sponsor of Tapestry Feminine Collective and the event coming for November 10th, 11th, and 12th, 2023. I'm so pleased today to have one of our presenters, Jenn Tasnim Savage, with us. And she and I are going to have, I know, a very powerful conversation. So let me tell you a little bit more about her. Jenn Tasnim is a spiritual guide, healer, an intuitive business coach who supports and guides modern-day mystics towards sacred leadership, self-mastery, and the full expression of their spiritual gifts through their businesses or creative projects. She has been in the healing field for over 2 decades and has studied with master teachers from various traditions all over the world. With a deep understanding of healing, the nervous system, consciousness, and business development, she is a trusted ally who holds sacred space and walks beside her clients as they overcome their fears and put into action the call God has placed upon their heart. Jenn Tasnim fully embraces slow living. When she isn't meditating, you can find her quietly contemplating life on her back patio as she listens to the birds while enjoying an iced almond milk latte. She is also an artist, chef, and an avid reader, just a few things, who loves watching baking cooking shows. She lives in Lake Oswego with her 2 teenage boys and their adventurous orange kitty, Link. Welcome, Jenn. I'm so glad you could join us.
Thank you. So happy to be here. And I just wanted to repronounce my name.
Please.
It's an Arabic word that often gets mispronounced. And it's important because the vibration, I think our name is so important of who we are. And so it's actually Tasnim.
Thank you. Tasnim. I appreciate that. Yes. And I am sensitive to that with my name. It's important for me that those names be correct. So Jenn Tasnim Savage.
Thank you.
I wanted to begin. I read your bio on your website, and I would encourage anyone to go and read the full bio because it is a really beautifully told story about your journey and compelling. We all have pivotal experiences in life, and for you, it's clear that they've led you here where you are right now. And one of the things you said was that you felt like you never belonged. And many of us can relate to that, but how did that look for you, that sense of not belonging?
I think it shows up in a lot of ways, but ultimately, I think if we have spiritual awareness from a very young age, it's like I was born with this intuition, with these gifts of seeing and knowing things. And then I'm living in a world where maybe patterns of distortions and traumas and dysfunctions are playing out, which I can hear you saying something to me, but I know what you're saying is a lie. I know you're lying to yourself. So there's that sort of component that's taken me a long time to grow into this mystical lens from which I see the life. And then the world, the 3D world we live in, which is dense and not connected to love and often contradicting that deeper truth that we know. And then I also, part of the dysfunction of my childhood is that we moved a lot. And almost every school year or every other school year, I was in a different school. So it was like the not belonging was I literally had to start from scratch so many times that I was never part of a group that already existed. So I was always trying to find my way in or not find my way in because I knew I was going to be leaving soon. So that it was like, there's just that not belonging component. And then we briefly touched on this in our conversation beforehand, but I also, once I came of an age to be sexually active and really understanding myself, I was like, whoa, like I don't fall traditionally in this heterosexual kind of thing. I really am attracted to what we would now call pansexual, right? Like spiritual, like it's the soul for me and the experience and the connection more so than what sex or gender you are. And then I became a Muslim. So it's, here I am, like called to this tradition that couldn't be more different from my lived life. So just there is a thread of feeling like I'm always on the outside or not belonging in so many components of my lived experience. Absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah. You and I have a lot in common, but what we didn't discuss was the fact that you moved so much as a child. I was in a new city every 3 to 4 years.
Yeah.
And I remember in our previous episode, Ray Hance talking about belonging being inseparable from place. And so if you're not consistently rooted, that becomes really much more challenging.
Difficult, right? Well, and even just then how do you connect with people? Like there's the space you connect with, but then it's also what relationships or how deep or authentic can those be when you know at some point you're leaving. So for me, that always showed up I'm going to be very careful not to get too connected because at some point, and unconsciously, I did leave all the time because that's what I knew how to do. So that it has taken me decades to untangle those patterns in my nervous system to create real community, which I think is such a beautiful, like, how did that lead me to this Tapestry experience with Jacqueline?
Yes, which is
what is the foundation, right? It's building community.
It's a really deep container of feminine connection. So how did you get from that to being able to really sink into and rest in that type of connection that we're building?
Well, I would say decades of work. For those of us that are on a spiritual path, like I was very curious and had that awareness when I was very young. So I was always seeking music, books, teachers, like something to keep me connected to truth that I had access to in my awareness, but wasn't quite living in my life. It wasn't translating into behavior change or decision-making changes. I had the awareness. And so I think the first thing was leaving my family of origin when I was very young. I got my little red car and drove to California, separated myself from the family system at a very young age and was, now I'm going to see the world and I'm going to travel and meet new people. And my spirituality opened up and connected with communities that really fed my heart. And so that was part of it. And then it's just been one of the phrases in Sufism is die before you die, right? It's like the ego death, as somebody who travels a mystical journey, you're here to metabolize all of the poison, whether it's from our family lineage, our own experiences. It's like my being is here to bring the love. And what is not that, I need to heal, process, release, metabolize, whatever it is, so that I'm then available for what is rightly mine. And what part of what was always rightly mine, I just didn't have access to, were deeply nourishing, honest conversations and connections with other spiritual women and men who are traveling this path and realizing, I'm not different. It's not that I don't belong. There's just a certain type of place that feels like home to me.
I love that. Different kind of place that feels like home. As you were talking about your sense of difference, of being outside the norms you were seeing around you, and also the disruption of always moving, it threw me back to that sense of hypervigilance and anxiety that I experienced. Because I had some similar experiences to you. I was raised in Christianity, and from a young age, I also had that radar going off. Something here isn't right. There's some truth coming in, but there's so much more that just doesn't sit right with my knowing that I couldn't even express as a young person. So that combined with the unrootedness and the I'm just wondering what you've seen in your own nervous system. What was that healing like to work with, or just speak to what it is to work with the nervous system in those types of experiences?
Such a great question. And I was really tracking it energetically as you were speaking, right? We think of the feminine, we think of the uterus, we think of the root, we think of the creative center in our wombs, right? And in all honesty, even for women who travel a very feminine spiritual path of the goddess or whatever, it's not many people are actually embodied. We live in a world that values our intelligence. But then speaking of that hypervigilance, right? So many of us, we talk about being heart-led. Maybe if we're lucky, we can tap into our heart. But how many people are actually living deeply rooted with, we all have these, what trauma and hypervigilance does is it keeps us disconnected from the flow of life, right? We have numb places in our body. We have mind that is full of poisonous thoughts that are like causing distractions. We have devices and technology that we're surrounded by and a million things to be addicted to that keep us out of our connection to self. So for me, there have been multiple teachers and paths and things that I've studied and trained and all of these components. But really, it comes down to, can I be present with what is happening in my life? Can I connect to my breath? Can I find where the sensation in my body is? Am I breathless and breathing in the top of my body? Or can I self-regulate? Can I find that place of deeper connection to source? Can I bring that into my awareness and allow my body to start softening?
Yes.
Can I lean into and feel the terror that arises when I feel like I'm going to hit something that's been covered up unconsciously for decades? So it's really learning the tools for unwinding the nervous system so that I can safely reside in a body which was deeply traumatized and which I was disassociated from for most of my life. And now it's, oh yeah, I can feel my feet on the ground. I can feel my sits bones in my seat. I actually can feel my vagina and my womb space and my softening belly as I move into menopause. It's like I have access to parts of my being that it was too scary. I was totally disconnected from. And so for me, it's a daily practice. Yes. And without that, my habits and conditioning is going to take me out. And so it's like whatever those practices are, whether it's breath work or meditation or toning or sound, or there's so many tools available to us. But for me, it is a daily commitment to my practice that keeps me in flow and available. Speaking of one of the stories that people may read if they go to my website, right? I lost my partner by way of suicide in my 20s, and I was called on a spiritual awakening, ended up on the top of this beautiful mountain in the Columbia Gorge. And the message was, the miracle of your life is waiting for you. And you have to show up for it. And it's, am I showing up for whatever is in front of me, for the most exquisitely beautiful and the most exquisitely painful? My life is my path. And how available am I to what is appearing in front of me? And making that my practice, that deep intimacy with self and God that nourishes and opens and heals.
That deep intimacy with self and God. That's it's what we usually run from.
Absolutely. Because we feel unworthy of it. That's the trick. The conditioning that we get makes us feel unworthy. It's like I always ask people, like, what keeps you from your prayer mat? Because we all have something, some kind of reason we're not creating that sacred space and bowing our hearts deeply in devotion to the beloved and ultimately to ourselves.
Yes. I want to talk about the feminine a little different in a little more personal way, if I may. You and I, before we got on the show, we're talking about some similarities within our own identities about our balance of masculine and feminine. For me, they feel, just for you astrology nerds, I have both my Mars and Venus in Aquarius, which means there's a need for and a set point for balance between those energies within myself. And I identify with you as pansexual. I'm wondering what that feels like for you and how it informs your relationship with your spiritual path, but really more your approach to the divine feminine, your relationship with it, and then by extension, feminine community.
It's a great question. There are a few pieces in that for me. It all comes down to identity, right? It's like this ever elusive thing and am I identified with my wounding and stories of wrongness or badness, or am I identified with and accepting the deep truth of who I am? Mm-hmm. And I have struggled with this, especially being on a monotheistic path and just scratching my head around the interpretation of sexuality or gender and how that can really be made into wrongness or something mm-hmm. sinful, right? Mm-hmm. Rather than opening up my being to be in full acceptance of the creation that I am, I come from God, right? This is the space in the middle. And for me, I think it's really around, I just keep coming back to self-acceptance and really love of self and how do I form who I'm relating to from that place of love and connection. Am I leaning in? Am I turning away from? And holding space in the divine feminine piece for me is newly awakening. I've had so many veils covering my heart, like hardened places. And we talked about kind of toxicity that we inherit from our mothers who have dysfunctional relationships with men and the masculine, and the way that gets turned or twisted. And so I'm really just coming back into self-acceptance of my body, of my being, my sexuality, the masculine and feminine parts of me, and being okay that I kind of straddle this middle zone. That doesn't mean I don't have access to femininity or masculinity. It's just I'm not out here on a very strong pole. And then and yet the divine mother, which is we talked about this, deeply feminine, is awakening and moving me, and the softness I now have in my body. So for me, it's like this not unexplored territory, but ever-changing space where I'm really learning not about Father God in the sky and what is out here spiritually, but anchoring down into what does it mean to be woman? What does it mean to be connected to the earth, to be in healed relationship with women, sisters, friends. So there's a lot in that to unpack. And I think self-acceptance is the word in the inquiry that just keeps coming back to me over and over again.
Yeah, that's beautiful. That's so real. That self-acceptance of however you see yourself, however you experience yourself, and giving yourself grace, accepting the grace that this is who I've been created to be. And as you were speaking, I got the sense of seeing you dance with those energies, dancing with the divine feminine.
Thank you. I love that movement. And it really is the soft flowing, it's a way for the divine feminine to express.
Yes.
It's a good reminder for me. So thank you.
We have a saying in the women's sanctuary, what is here? Give it space. It's giving spaciousness to all that is here and all that arises.
It's so important. That is the path of the mystic, right? No part of us gets left behind.
Let's talk a little bit about your work and what you're doing and whatever else you'd like to share about what you do.
Yeah, so I started my journey in the healing field 2.5 decades ago. It's hard to believe, but I went to massage school and really discovered Carolyn Mace, Deepak Chopra, the forefront of this body-mind spiritual connection at the time, and couldn't get enough of it, right? It was just suddenly my life started making sense. These things I knew, but I didn't have a name for. And I practiced intuitive body work and did a lot of personal healing in that first 15 years. And then met my Sufi sheikh, which is really where the mystical spiritual connection for me came online. And it was like, oh, this deep knowing I have about healing and about divinity and about what is possible in this lived human life, to be free from the pains and the traumas and the way that, so at that point I was still just unconsciously recreating. So it was really in meeting my Sufi sheikh that it became like not just body work, but now spiritual. And there's that masculine, feminine thing, right? Here is matter and spirit and the meeting place of our heart and the center of that. And so that decades, I was an avid student and also working with people in my healing practice, had hundreds of people on my table, had mystical experiences, access to relatives that had passed on, spiritual guides who would show up in the room. And I just became this conduit and channel for what, and they would always be like, oh, massage me harder, right? So then it was, our relationship to pain is such an interesting, it's like, we just want it to go away. And so I started becoming like in the practice of, instead of massaging, digging my elbow into that part of your back, it's like, how about we just listen? How about we just take a breath and feel where the pain is and what is that pain? And it really started me on this, like way before the kind of somatic experiencing was even maybe born. I'm having this real time experience with this. Let's listen to the body. What is she saying? What is he saying to you? And so that was the background of many years of my life. And then I had this, my house, I was living in California at the time. My house flooded. I was about ready to give birth. I had no intention of ever coming back to Oregon. And I was like, what the heck am I going to do? And so moved to Portland, had a baby, experienced tremendous loss from leaving California and knowing within minutes of having a child that the person with whom I was having the child with was not somebody. I have this very unique relationship experience, and that we were breaking up when I found out I was pregnant. So, and then we decided to stay together, but we knew it was like there was a mismatch in what we were doing, but we did it anyway. We moved to Portland, and then suddenly I'm unhappily married, away from all of my friends. And I'm like, I've got to do something. And I now have this child, this accidental attachment parenting, this child attached to my breast and sleeping with me around and it was just this intense time of, I can't do body, or in my mind, it was like, I wanted to find something other than body work to do. And so I studied online marketing for myself. Like I never had any intention ever of being a business coach. And then suddenly people are like, hey, do you want to help me create my opt-in gift and write my nurture sequence? I'm like, you want to pay me to do what? You know what I mean? It was like this, like, as much as I became an accidental attachment parent, it was suddenly I'm like this accidental business coach. And so then it was like, okay, now you want to, and people just kept asking me like, what, can you help me with this thing? Can you help me launch this product? Can you help me create this thing? And so suddenly 10 years in, like I've got a lot of experience. And so what has happened is the mystical component of our soul's gift, and for those of us for whom the expression of that, or an experience that we've overcome that wants to be the foundation of the lessons we then go on to teach, or the book that we write, or the talk that we give, suddenly is like the marriage of these two things, of this deep, like mystical preneurship. Oh, I don't have to leave behind the healing, because an entrepreneur who's bringing stuff forward is going to have all of these fears that arise, and the vulnerability of sharing their voice and understanding their value and how to clearly communicate themselves. And so it just has over time solidified into this very unique offering of holding people's deep sacred work and helping them, again, bringing in the masculine and feminine, right? The structure for them to then say, oh yeah, here's what I need, the actions I need to take, or the roadmap that needs to happen in order for me to be able to actualize and manifest and give birth to this thing that is in my heart to give birth to.
Oh, that's so beautiful. Like I see the need for that. I spend a lot of time in the business world, and they talk about relationship marketing and relationship building, and in terms of sales. And I keep coming back to what we're talking about, which Yeah, it's really even deeper than that, but thankfully they're beginning to see that it is the marriage of the intuitive and the heart connection and creating that in the outside world and creating those gifts, putting those gifts out into the world through the support of those heart connections and relationships.
Well, and what I love is like some people don't need what I have. They're not hardwired. And is it our spirituality? Is it our neurodivergence? Is it our trauma? How do these things shape us? But there is something often different about my clients who need a different kind of holding, who are connected to their own innate spiritual gifts and want to honor that and not sacrifice that along the way, right? So it's like, how do we serve God through our businesses? And not everyone is asking that question. Mm-hmm. So some business coaches, and that's so great. And if you happen to be highly sensitive, if you happen to have fears and traumas and stuff about visibility, or your nervous system is highly sensitive and gets overwhelmed by tech, or here's all the ways that this manifests, right? And if you can have somebody holding your heart while you're thriving and holding the heart of the people who are coming, that you're here to serve, and you have someone to lean into that can help guide and direct not only your purpose and what is coming through, but also has some strategy to support you in ways. I am finding it to be such a beautiful gift for people like Jacqueline, who are my ideal clients, who have this, their business is their service to the divine, right? It is from that place of listening that they now have something to create in the world. Yes. And it's different. It's not that way for everybody, but for those of us who need that level of witnessing and spiritual holding and support as we metabolize and integrate all the things that have to in order to be standing in total confidence and comfort with what is ours to give. Yeah. It's such a gift. And I love that being a part of Tapestry, like I know this, I'm really good at what I do, but there is something about this creation of Tapestry and the council and Jacqueline and like the energetic threads, like she talks about the weaving. It's like, it's palpable. The moment I spoke to her, I was like, I'm all in. Yeah. And it's working on me. Like I have the great honor of holding space for her as she brings this forward. And the gift of the field that we are playing in is exquisite. Yes. And it's bringing stuff up. It's forcing me to be more authentic, more true. It's bringing up those, Jacqueline talks about this so beautifully, of the knots that have to be unwoven. And I just see the divine light coming into my body and shaking loose that lie or that distortion that I've believed. And it's, because this field is powerful women, deeply committed to their medicine, building something that I believe is going to impact women and the world for years to come.
Absolutely. I agree. And yeah, the knots is such a great metaphor to bring softness. You can feel those hard places, to bring softness and opening to them. And as you were speaking about your work, I'm like, it's so needed. Two things. It's so needed that women with vision and called and on a devotional path to have the support and companionship, the walking with, to help bring that to life. And it's where we're headed. It's the leading edge, I believe. I think Jacqueline would agree. The new economy of this collaboration, walking with each other, and finding the alignment of gifts and service and in our uniqueness and in community at the same time, and honoring all of that.
Which is such a beautiful thing to be a part of. And going back to the not belonging thing, right? It's to be at the center of this with women like you and Jacqueline and the other council members, and the reflection of truth of just how much we belong, how important it is that our hearts have come together. And it's, oh, look at the journey I've had to travel in order to find myself here at this moment in deep, like bowing deeply in surrender to myself, going back to my story of the mountain, because I showed up for it.
Yes.
Because I didn't let that anxiety or my hypervigilance or those lies or those stories or conditioning tell me a truth that said I didn't belong here.
Yeah. And I think that's the key is we are showing up in as much truth and integrity as we have in service to our own hearts and to the heart of the collective.
Yeah, and the other component is in total faith, like deep trust in what the divine is creating through us. Because is there a roadmap for this? Has it been done before? I don't know. I'm sure somewhere in some corner of the world, maybe, but it's, oh yeah, faith guides us through these places. And man, how beautiful is it when we trust it and where it's taking us.
Yes. And I find that my working edge, just continuing to lean into that trust and that faith and knowing that grace is always here.
Always.
Jenn, it's been so lovely to get to know you, to hear your story and to hear about your work. I know there will be women who resonate with it. How can people find out more about you and your work and contact you?
Yeah, my website is Jenn with 2 N's, savage.com. And I'm on Facebook. It can be found. I'm in the Tapestry group. If people want to join us, I'm going to be actually starting to do some live transmissions in there to really bring through. I see it. I talked about it a little bit, that field, and we're all these little pinpricks of light. And the more our hearts connect, the brighter the light gets, and the more it moves out into the field and across the planet. So I really am going to be holding these sacred gathering, guided meditative visualization experiences where our hearts can come together. So in the Tapestry group immediately would be a great place to find me.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Oh, would you like to share anything about your presentation at Tapestry in November?
My title is called Tending the Garden of the Feminine Heart. And it might shift to the mystic's heart. I'm still in that place but it really is, as a Sufi, I travel a path of the 28 stations of the heart. It moves us from the densest, most veiled, disconnected parts of self all the way to the unification we have with Creator, God, Source, Life. And am I in relationship? Is my heart hardened and covered over? Can I bring my breath in and allow that crusty earth that is my inherited nature to be watered and nourished by the divine and opened so that those seeds can take root and flourish in my becoming? And so the talk is really bringing in some of those spiritual principles and a guided, embodied experience for women to connect in more deeply to what lives in their own hearts.
Beautiful. I can't wait.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for being here with us and sharing your heart with us.
It's good to be here. Thank you.
Thank you for listening. We will be back again with another presenter soon. Definitely, as Jenn said, you can learn more at tapestryfemininecollective.com, and please join us in the Facebook group. The event again is November 10th through 12th, 2023, and you won't want to miss it. This is Arlia Hoffman. We will see you here again next time on the Tapestry Feminine Collective podcast. Thank you for joining us on Tapestry Feminine Collective podcast. To learn more, visit tapestryfemininecollective.com.